Hey everybody, HeadspaceConnections back with another video. This one's going to be a little more on the lines more scientific as opposed to personal. Now, what we're going to be talking more along the lines of today is why people consider DID to be a more of a personality disorder, as opposed to now that they're realizing it's not a personality disorder, it's a trauma-based disorder. And we're going to kind of go into the details somewhat of how they came up with that and the different theories that they have on it. Now, originally, researchers thought dissociative identity disorder, or back in those times was called multiple personality disorder. What was previously believed was that some still believe it. I think more people are starting to go into more of the research that's done now. But what was previously believed that during any kind of childhood traumatic experiences, because the child was not able to fully grasp or fully handle the situation of what it was being put through, would split into or fragment into different alternate identities, alternate personalities, to be able to house those different traumatic experiences. However, that child would be like the original or core, as most people are familiar with those terms and have their own definitions for them. And basically, those other personalities just came from that set core or original. However, with the new theories that they're coming up with now, there's one that some of you are familiar with, some are not, called theory of structural dissociation, where basically what it says is that as an infant, people are not one set personality. They are actually different little bits and pieces of psyche that have yet to come together, as where you will sometimes get happy baby and the next moment you have upset baby because you didn't feed it in time, or and make it happy and it's like it never happened, and things like that. So about the ages of between 5 to 9, I believe around 7 to 9 is the most common, is where those personality bits start to mesh together and become that one set personality. However, traumatic experiences that happen before that time or during that time can cause issues with those personalities meshing, because the brain can't handle those said traumatic experiences, or that or the things that anything that we consider traumatic to cause those personalities from being able to mesh completely. And that is where you will get those different personality states as the child grows up. Now, with the theory of structural dissociation, there is no such thing as an original or a core. And the best analogy I could come up with that is if you drop a plate or a bowl or something like that on the floor and it shatters, which one of those pieces is the original? Well, want to be technically all of them. Doesn't matter, if you have pieces, shards, or like little flakes or fragments of it, they're all part of that whole, and you need each one of those pieces in order to be able to make that plate or bowl whole again. And with the theory of structural dissociation, as to when research was being done and people started figuring out that DID and things like that was actually on the trauma spectrum, is when you start getting into the structural dissociation of personality. And basically what this is that there are 3 parts to this. There's primary, secondary, and tertiary. Going from, I guess, simplest to more complex, if you want to put it that way. Now, with the primary SD is where you're going to find one ANP and one EP. Now, for those of you that don't know, ANP stands for apparently normal parts, and EP stands for emotional parts. Now, ANPs are kind of like the ones that kind of take care of daily life and able to run things, go to work, and things like eat, things like that. Emotional parts are the ones that will generally hold those traumatic experiences and those traumatic memories. So usually these parts are where you're going to get your flashbacks and trouble like that. Now, with that first primary structural dissociation circle, you're usually going to have like your PTSD and your simple dissociative disorders. And because you usually only have like that one ANP and that one EP. Now, with the secondary one is where it starts to get a little bit more complex. You have that one ANP still, but now you have like two or three or more EPs. So that one ANP is still like the main host, the main part that handles daily living, but now you have like all these little EPs right here kind of creeping up in the back. And in the secondaries where you're going to find more of your patients with BPD, CPTSD, and start getting a little more complicated dissociative disorders like OSDD. Now, when you get to the tertiary structural dissociation circle, that is where it gets a little bit more complicated because now you have more than one ANP and more EPs associated with each of those ANPs. Now, these different ANPs, or apparently normal parts, are the ones that between themselves can handle daily life and usually generally may or may not have trauma associated with them. Because when you start getting into the tertiary, why I say that is because this is where DID starts coming into place. And it gets even more complicated as you go into polyfragmented DID, which is what we are, because then you start to get into more grayer areas than what the previous ones hold. Now, with those ANPs that you will have these different emotional parts, the ones that carry trauma associated, like maybe 2 or 3 to this one, 2 or 3 to that one, 2 or 3 fragments of that one. Not necessarily how it goes, but that's the best example I can come up with. And with those, when you start getting into polyfragmented DID and things of that nature, you can have ANPs that can carry traumatic experiences, and you can have emotional parts that may not even be that emotional or may not have trauma, at least maybe that they know of. I don't know. But for our system in general, we have ANPs that do carry trauma. They can just handle it pretty well, and or they processed it enough that they can handle daily life and things like that, and they move up or were originally emotional parts and then move up into being an apparently normal part or a host part. And with the EPs, you can have some emotional parts that may carry emotion and things like that, but it could be like, say, if you have a child part, it doesn't necessarily carry trauma, but what they could be is the child version of you that got that loving family that they needed, that had that encouragement that they needed as a kid. So they could still count as an emotional part because they don't handle daily life like these other ANPs do, but they may not necessarily hold trauma. And that's where kind of how people start figuring out that DID was more of a trauma-based disorder as opposed to a personality problem. Now, with that, because it is on the lines of a trauma disorder, like PTSD and the BPD, you can have a ton of other comorbid disorders that go along with it. But with those comorbid disorders, those alters are basically like a byproduct. of that traumatic experience, like from the PTSD, BPD, all those different emotional parts are byproducts of that initial trauma that was undergone whenever it was undergone. And that's basically it for our structural dissociation talk and things like that. If we missed anything, or if maybe didn't word something properly and you have questions, feel free to let us know. We really don't mind. We want to be as accurate as possible. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything, feel free to comment down below. If you like our videos and you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to be able to know when we do upload our videos. We're going to try to be a little bit more regular about them, but we're going to kind of keep them short because we noticed with some of our previous videos we would start to kind of dissociate heavily after a set point in time, and I think this will just be a little bit easier for us to handle, and for everybody else that, you know, will have time to actually watch them short 10-15 minute videos as opposed to 30 or more. But for those of you that are not familiar, we do have a Tumblr, a Pinterest, and an Instagram account, all by the same name, HeadspaceConnections. And feel free to follow us on there. And we hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we hope that it was helpful in understanding a little bit more of the basic breakdown of trauma disorders and how those kind of work. And that's about it. I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.